In this episode, I'll be giving my review and reaction to the 1993 movie In the Name of the Father. Let's get right into In the Name of the Father. This was a pretty middling movie, in my opinion. I thought the introduction to the movie was pretty strong, and we'll get into my thoughts and reactions to start it out, but I thought the beginning was actually really interesting. Probably the first 10 to 15 minutes, very, fast paced, intense, keeps me locked in. However, the movie sort of dissented as the movie went along, and this just became very depressing and very miserable to watch with not a lot of intrigue, in my opinion, going on screen. I know that maybe some people would say, oh, that's what you're supposed to think, that you're supposed to be sad and watch this movie, but I don't know. I thought the second half of this movie was kind of a snooze fest, in my opinion, and I enjoyed the first half much more than the second half. This is a very sad and just depressing movie overall. Reminded me of the documentary Making a Murder. The premise is like interesting, and I guess this is based off of a true story, so I can't critique the plot too much, but I don't know, I feel like there was kind of different angles happening that I just didn't really care for the characters too much, and I know Daniel Day-Lewis is the GOAT of all time, and we need to, everything he's in just needs to be the greatest thing ever, and we need to glaze Daniel Day-Lewis. But he did all right, and I thought this was fine overall. We'll get into my thoughts and reactions, but I was not a big supporter of In the Name of the Father, and I didn't hate it. I thought there were some strong points, and I do like the overall message of the movie, but I thought the ending especially was a little bit lackluster in terms of that. And the way that the movie kind of ends is just a whimper in the grand scheme of things of all this build up, and then it's kind of just, this happens and that's it. Let's get into my thoughts and reactions throughout the movie. Also, this movie is directed by Jim Sheridan, who I really like Jim Sheridan's movie Brothers. There's a review on that if you're interested to see what I had to say about Brothers. I did that review about a year ago, and I really enjoyed that movie. But, we'll see what I score this movie. Starting off this movie, In the Name of the Father, you have, I always like to talk about the intro. I feel like I haven't actually talked about the introduction scene in a while. You have the introduction scene, and I thought this was a great intro, which I know, every movie has the classic 10 minutes of just nothing happening, which you just get used to. That's not the real introduction to the movie. This is patrons are walking into a bar, everything's kind of happening on the street and nothing's, everything's normal, or so you'd think, and then boom, a bomb goes off. That was like, whoa, now I'm locked in. And they, that's it. They're right into it. So locked in from there. I like that introduction, kind of a really big hook to reel you into the movie. And then we meet our main character after that. Jerry and his friend are trying to steal some stuff from the top of a roof, kind of confusing what's going on there. And I like this scene as well, where they realize that they're trying to take something from the top of the roof. They go after them to, or I guess I don't know if they're trying to steal something or there's like rules on you're not allowed to take scrap metal from a certain point. I think it's a scrap metal. You're not allowed to take scrap metal, and they were upset that they were taking scrap metal or something. And I liked this scene as well, where it's an instant chase down, where they lose his character Jerry, and the other friend are just running through the streets, and there's just instant riots of this tension between the British people and the people of Ireland. There's some sort of internal conflict here going on, and that was a little bit hard to follow in the grand scheme of things, but maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention to that. I know that there's been troubles between Great Britain and Ireland throughout the years, so I'm not going to try and sit here like a history expert. I just couldn't really follow what was going on in the politics sense of this movie. But I liked the scene of Daniel Day-Lewis running through the street, chasing down, and he gets back to his people, the Ireland people, Irish people. I should know that I'm part Irish, but this was odd. They make him take his pants down and almost shoot him over trying to get a little bit of scrap metal. And I definitely don't think it was stealing something, but you know, until his father steps in there and is like, "What are you doing, Jerry?" This man might have got shot for just trying to get a little extra scrap metal. So that was very weird. And also the taking the pants down. Is that just a standard thing that we do in this time and age? I don't know what specific year this was. Probably like the 60s or 70s is when this movie took place. But I thought that was a little odd. No. Continuing on, we have the kind of ho hums here where Jerry's basically just a piece of shit, and that's why I didn't really like this movie that much. We're supposed to be like rooting for Daniel Day Lewis, but his character is just a clown. Like he's just an asshat to society, and he's not even sorry for himself. He's like, this is just who I am, and you're gonna have to deal with it. That I'm a piece of shit, basically, to everyone. It's like this guy isn't empathetic. I'm not empathetic towards this guy. He's just a loser, bro, and he's has no like. His parents give him money to go to Great Britain and get his life together and figure it out, and he just goes to Xanadu the first day. Come on, man, make a life for yourself. Don't be a hippie, bro. Sad. It was just sad to watch. He just, well, first he meets with his old mate, our old friend from school, on the boat, which they're like, let's just turn to shit when we get to the UK because God knows, we got money and we can have a prospect on having a good life. But he gets to Xanadu, which there's this very weird vibe in Xanadu, which is this like hippies paradise of like somehow like 17 stories of a building. And there's this guy here who doesn't like him, like Jerry off the rip, because he's basically stealing his girl. And so, in order to do your rite of passage in Xanadu to get into the place, you have to kiss somebody and just absorb smoke, which is like some weird ritual that I guess was another thing. Maybe I'm just not up to date on the Irish rituals or of the 1970s or 60s. I thought that was like, what is going on here? But it's Xanadu, it's hippies. We're allowed to do whatever we want. Free the people, no war, all that type of stuff. And Jerry didn't even have to live in. He wasn't like forced to live on his own. He had a place to crash with his aunt, and I did think this scene was pretty funny where they're obviously just like stoned out of their minds talking to their aunt, and she's just like clueless in what's going on. And I don't know, I thought that was a pretty funny scene that made me laugh out loud. That was the funniest scene of the movie because from here on out it just gets depressing, outright depressing. And we continue on. They're kind of just fucking around in the city, turning into bums, which is like not really that interesting to watch because this movie's all over the place. Like it starts out with like a bomb and riots, and then we go to like being hippie bums for like the middle part, and then the end is just them in jail. It's like, yeah. Anyways, they don't have a place to live. They're like sleeping on a bench with a guy who becomes later on very important to the movie, or a homeless guy, and or they talk to a homeless guy. I don't think they sleep on the bench. Then the homeless guy's like, "Get off my bench! I'm sleeping here," even though the park's closing. So I don't know why Jerry and his friend have to get out of the park, but the homeless guy is just allowed to sleep on the bench. That seems inequitable. But they're back on the street. They need a place to stay, of course. Why would they ever stay with the aunt who's offering, perfect house and room for them both to stay in? Because a hooker drops her keys in front of the house. And what does this mean for Jerry and his friend? They get to steal the money and completely pimp out their outfits. And do they use this money to get a new place, to leverage a job, to find something, get stable food and water? No, he just spends it on like clothes and pimping out his outfit and wearing this stupid ass jacket. And he brings it back home, and his family's like, "What are you doing, bro?" And he's like, "You guys suck, blah blah blah." And here's when the movie takes a complete shift: is when in the middle of the night he's taken because the jealous guy from Xanadu snitched on him. So snitches get stitches, except in this movie where nothing happens to anybody who did anything wrong. Spoiler alert for later on. This guy was jealous that Jerry was stealing his girl, so all of a sudden these police officers show up in the middle of the night, take Jerry. His family's like, "What's going on?" We've seen this story across time. Adolescence comes to mind, that TV show that just came out where they come in the middle of the night, everyone's like, "What's going on?" We've seen that scene going on when the family doesn't know what's happening. Nothing really to stand out from that moment. And we get to the interrogation of Jerry being in captivity, and this cop, man, these police officers, what are we doing, dude? This couldn't possibly be legal. Where they basically just force Jerry and his friend to admit. Well, first they get the friend to admit. I think his name's Tim. They get him to admit that Jerry did something wrong, and then they have that on Jerry, where they're like basically essentially torturing Jerry initially to get him to fess up to something he didn't do, which is just very bad police work. And I know the police in this time weren't the best, but you're basically just pinpointing this on one suspect and saying, "You guys did, I know it. I just need to get you to say it now." It's bad police work. No investigation. They have a witness, but they can't get him because it's a homeless guy, and they're not going to go out and get the guy when they think they already have the people in captivity. So, in order to encourage Jerry to admit to his crimes, they have this wicked cop who's like a complete piece of garbage, demonic, as I described him. He threatens to shoot Jerry's dad, and he holds the the gun to his own head like a goof. This guy was a clown. I don't know what was going on with him. And yeah, just really just intimidating them till they get what they want them to admit, which is bad police work and very, uncomfortable to watch. I guess, I know what people will say on this review, but it is what it is. Of course, we get to court, and there's not really much to say here. They don't get their cool lawyer until later on in the movie, so the person who's defending them, always forget that the British system is like this weird. There's people wearing wigs in a court, and it's just like there's a bunch of judges instead of one, and there's this person can speak from the bench and the side. It's hard to follow on what's really going on. I'm not familiar with the British judicial system, but of course, there's four of them. Girl who he stole, his friend, and then one other person, and Jerry. All four of them are guilty with completely ridiculous punishments. The crime that they think they committed is that bomb that we watched go off in the beginning of the movie, but it's pretty obvious that Jerry never did that throughout the movie. I don't know if that's supposed to be a question, but there's another movie coming up that I'll review that there's a question of if a murder was committed, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Jail stuff, really, this is what put me to sleep, bro. I'm gonna be honest. you know, Giuseppe's there, and it's sad to watch, but like Jerry's just being a piece of shit the whole time. So it's like, what do I care about this when like he's not like he takes care of his father towards the end of the jail stuff, which is endearing and cool, and I like Giuseppe, but it's the movie kind of lends you to think that Giuseppe wasn't the best father to Jerry growing up, and that Jerry is just like now a piece of shit because he grew up like being a loser. So it's like neither of these people are really redeemable or like I want them to be free because they are, you know, in here for a crime they didn't commit, part of a conspiracy they didn't commit in terms of Giuseppe. And, not much really of what I'm looking for in a movie happens in this like middle section with the jail. I'm just being honest. Like they move around jails, he shaves his head or something. It's like this was all pretty memorable to me. Forgettable to me. I think this is when I was almost falling asleep watching the movie, to be honest. But who's here but a IRA agent, McAndrew, who really starts to spice things up, which is a weird shift too, where nothing's happening for. It's like this movie was all over the place in my opinion. Nothing's happening for a while, and then this guy shows up and just causes the riot immediately. And he admits that he's the one who set off the bomb, but like there's nothing you can do about it because he's IRA, and they're just trying to get the IRA in here, and this guy's running the jail. It's all very hard to follow because it all just happens fast and there's no really lead up to like the McAndrew stuff. And he's starting riots, he's just burning people alive. He's Joker. He's essentially Joker in Dark Knight. He's like, fuck the people, I'm just gonna burn everybody, and it is what it is. And he doesn't really have any regrets for his action. He's just an agent of chaos. Okay, there's I guess that's something that people would do. Not these crazy movie characters like the Joker, man. I don't know. I thought the prison stuff was where the movie kind of lost me in my opinion, and the second half overall was pretty sleepy, and then it turns like you're like falling asleep and then you wake up and it's like what is going, that's kind of how I felt watching this movie, to be honest. Giuseppe is ailing in health, and he didn't seem that old, maybe like late 50s, I don't know, but this is the 60s in a British jail system, so probably not the best longevity for your life. Of course, when Jerry and Giuseppe finally have a moment of admitting to each other that, maybe I could have helped you or maybe I could be less of a piece of shit, Giuseppe dies. It's sad. Giuseppe was probably my favorite character in this movie because Jerry's a fucking loser. I said what I said. Sorry, Daniel Day-Lewis. So I did like the little tribute to him with Jerry being able to light some stuff on fire, and, that happens. R.I.P. Giuseppe. There's another side plot happening at the back half of this movie, which is also pretty weird, where there's this woman who's a lawyer and she's either pregnant or sick or something. I think she's sick all the time. I don't know. I forget what happened even. She is investigating for Jerry. She gets to take over their case. She's like really inspired to do it. She's, part of like the Free the People movement. I don't know if she's like a hippie or something. All-time botch by the government, where the government did a horrible job. If they're trying to cover this up, they just left the document with a note on top of it too saying, don't give this to the defense. And then the one day the guy's out that usually is there to protect the documents, there's the sub, and he's like, oh yeah, go do whatever you want. Of course, she snags that shit right away. And they've been there for 15 years, which is pretty weird to put in perspective because, I guess we kind of just see Giuseppe age over time. There's not really a thing on the screen or something that tells us like, hey, time's going on besides him just potentially slowly dying. But 15 years in prison for something he didn't do is crazy. You know, I don't take that lightly. I think that's an essential part of this movie. That is what the whole movie is based on. But it was like, you know, it just wasn't a fun time to get to the end, really. And you don't need to have a fun time. But maybe I'm trying to like make this say, oh, you know, everything needs to be positive. If that's the reaction you're getting from my review, that's not though. It's just boring. Like I'm just gonna be honest about that. Here we go. We get to go to the courtroom where this is the big reveal of the end of the movie, and this lawyer helps them find them not guilty now, do this document. And you think, oh, you know, Jerry's gonna run around and do something. Like we're gonna have a nice little scene or two of him like living in the free world, getting his life together, doing something. No, it just ends with him walking out the front door, which was a cool part of the ending of like them being like, you got to sneak out the back or people are gonna like come for you. But he's like, no, I'm walking out that fucking front door, bitch. And they all walk out the front, which was cool when they all get to be freed one by one. And then he's like surrounded by a mob and they're all hyped up for him. But you know, by that time I was like, finally this can be over. No, I'm overreacting. It was like it was an okay movie. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. So they do overturn it for Giuseppe as well. We get a little post-credit scene of this. You know, usually they have these in the based on a true story movies where at the end they tell you what's going on, and so they all got to be free, which is good for them. Nice, happy for them that they were freed by something they didn't do. Also, Giuseppe post I always mess this word up. Posthumously, I believe, got his sentence overturned. So good for Giuseppe as well. He was a free man when he lays to rest now, and the other family members as well were freed. I thought the aunt was like involved. I guess that was like the big plot point. It was the aunt was somehow like the mastermind behind all this stuff. Who knows? And the status part is none of the police members, the IRA men, get in trouble for this. So McAndrew, nothing happens to him for just burning people out. I'm assuming there was actually probably some stuff that McAndrew got in trouble for, but the police member who like was just being like, you know, that meme of like the gun and stuff, nothing happens to him, and just being a piece of shit. Nothing happens to him. Nothing happens to any of the police members for covering this up. So no consequences, which you know you can't change the true story. And maybe this was like a movement to maybe get something done on those ends. There might be like some post movie convictions there, but yeah. As you can tell through my review, I thought the first half of this movie was pretty strong, and you know I liked it. There was some good stuff in the second half, but it was just kind of a slog to get through all that stuff overall, in my opinion. And I'm going to land this movie at a 6.9. You know, I thought this was. Do I regret watching this? Probably not. It was good, you know, and there's Daniel Day Lewis hype. It was good enough. Interesting to see where people rate Daniel Day Lewis movies highly and stuff. So it was entertaining enough where I'm in the like high sixes on it, but there was just parts that was really annoying to me and kind of boring in my opinion. So I don't know. That's kind of how I balance out the review there at a 6.9. So where does this movie relate to the other movies reviewed so far? This is the 102nd movie reviewed by the Dubcast, coming in at number 77. So far this is the second 6.9 we've given. We also gave a 6.9 to Boogie Nights. I do have Boogie Nights slightly above this movie, so you know, splitting hairs there, both 6.9s. And in other comparisons, this movie does lose out to Brothers, which was an 8.4. Jim Sheridan directing both of those movies. So that's where we leave it on the comparison part of the review. And coming up in the Dubcast, we got more movie reviews. I got Limitless coming soon for that movie review. And just more movie reviews in general. As always, TV stuff. I'm doing Daredevil, Born Again Season 2, weekly recaps, and Survivor 50 weekly recaps, Maul Shadow Lord weekly recaps. Those will be short term on the Maul stuff, and then anything else playoffs before every round of the NBA playoffs. We're gonna do a live stream talking about the previous round and predictions for the next round. So had the first one last Monday. If you're interested in that, UFC numbered events, we'll do those next ones in May, and yeah, just whatever I see fit on the Dubcast. So would love if you subscribed, comment your thoughts on this movie. Am I too low on it? I feel like people really like this movie, and I was like, yeah, it was all right, you know. So let me know your thoughts down below. Where am I wrong on this movie? And yeah, like, dislike, do what you got to do. Social media stuff, been churning out the short-term content. So if you've seen any of that stuff, appreciate you. And I'll leave you out with that. As always, be easy, y'all.